What's up, everybody? How's it going? It's Tuesday again. It's that time of the week where we're gonna get together and friggin' talk about some 40k. So that'll be fun. Hope everyone had a good weekend. Everybody's hanging out, ready to get a little bit tactical this Tuesday. Let's get cracking, chat. Hell yeah. How's it going, everybody? Nurgle Matt in chat, making an appearance. The patron saint of 40k. Or the patron chaos god, I guess, of 40k Twitch streaming or streaming in general. Paul Bridge, Cthulakas. Thanks for coming in and hanging out, everybody. I don't know. Hope everyone's having a good day. I've been a little bit under the weather today. It was kind of a physical recuperation day for me. So we slept in late and didn't get enough work done, which is unfortunate. But hopefully, I'll be able to get through the entire show without falling asleep. That's gonna be the game plan. Oh man. So it's been a pretty interesting weekend in competitive 40k. We've kind of had a domination of Tyranids, despite the fact that this is, I think, the first real full weekend that we've seen the post-nerf Tyranid Codex be implemented, and it hit their win percentage somewhat, but probably not enough from a game health perspective. I think we're looking at about a 65% win rate for Tyranids, and that's too high. So. We're relatively similar for Eldar, although Tyranids are coming out in greater force, which makes a little bit of sense, I think, because the good Eldar lists are very difficult to play. So, whereas Tyranids sometimes can just win by throwing models forward, which is unfortunate. That's not really what you want to see in a powerful army. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting place to be in. I think we're probably looking at some points cuts or points increases for Tyranids in the next couple weeks, and I hope that happens sooner rather than later, because it is going to be they are pretty dominant right now, which I'm sure we'll talk about. That said, post nerf we are seeing some new innovations in the Tyranid metagame, which is super exciting, and we're seeing some other factions come to the fore, all of which we're going to talk about today. So just like we talked about last week, we're going to be continuing the same schedule where if I have games to talk about, which I do because I played a tournament this weekend, as you can see on the screen. We'll do that, and also we'll talk about some of the competitive innovations, new lists, and trends that are happening in the 40k metagame, and I think it's gonna be freaking cool, everybody. So let's like do it and stuff. But first off, we'll talk about games that I played this weekend, because I did play a tournament, which I was pretty excited about. It's been a little while since I played a tournament because I went back-to-back streaming at Motor City Mayhem and then at Warhammer Retreat. And this weekend, chat, before we get too far along, I do have to tell everyone about it. I will also not be playing in a tournament because I will be streaming another local GT. So if you are on my Twitch channel, that's where the GT coverage is going to end up. Go check that out over there, and that'll be great. So far, we've been streaming in-person competitive events on Twitch, and then they go over to the YouTube replay channel. I have considered maybe switching the streaming over to YouTube, to the Tactical Tortoise TV YouTube channel at some point. For those who aren't on it, that's youtube.com/TacticalTortoisetv, little TV on the end, and all of the stream VODs go over there. So there's hundreds of hours of competitive 40k gameplay, and if you want to check that out. And I have been a little disenchanted with the Twitch streaming recently. I like it better than the YouTube streaming because it has more cool like interactions and stuff, but I don't know. YouTube's also doing pretty well. Anyway, let's friggin' talk about some games and stuff. I took a picture of my list, and I don't know if it made it to my gallery. I guess it didn't. Oh, it did. It's just not showing up. Cool. All right. Well, here's the picture. I'll open it up. All right, here's my list. So this is, with great humility and embarrassment, I do have to apologize to everyone, because this is one of the first times I played in a tournament without a fully painted list. The tournament I was playing in did not require full, it wasn't implementing the battle ready VP, or it just gave the 10 VP to everybody basically, so that you could experiment with builds and stuff. And I played a list that unfortunately had unpainted models in it. So the greatest of shame on me, But that was mostly because post-nerf, I entirely revamped my list. I was painting up a list with multiple Maleceptors in a Leviathan style. And in my opinion, I don't think that list is quite as viable as it was in the past. So I have moved to a Kraken variety of list, which hence the title of the video, and I think is one of the trends that we're seeing a lot of the competitive Tyranid lists move towards. There's still kind of a holdout for Leviathan because it's so tanky and Hive Nexus is such a phenomenal psychic power, but High Fleet Kraken giving you that extra oomph of speed is like a really big deal. Especially if you are focused on well, if you're focused on winning the Eldar matchup, that's one reason. If you're not fast enough to catch them, you'll never win. But also, if you are focused on the slower units, so things like warriors, those warriors will never cross the table alive without opportunistic advance. Is my humble opinion, and I've seen nothing to disabuse me of that notion so far. So we are playing High Fleet Kraken. You can find the list. There's a link down in the description, and there's if you > list in the chat, then you'll get a copy of the list as well. And it's pretty good. I like it so far. So the crux of the list is that it's just a single battalion, and we're focused on the infantry. So there's 2 warrior bricks, 6-man, with 2 venom cannons and adrenal glands to get that extra +1 speed. We have 2 3-man warriors and a gargoyle unit. The gargoyles are mostly there to perform actions and be able to give you an opportunity to move something 20 inches to go grab side objectives. I had actually considered Sky Slasher Swarms in this list, and because now that they can actually be included because they have the correct keywords, I actually think they're a pretty decent include if you just need units to go, be able to score secondaries and grab objectives. They can't really do actions because they're not troops and they're not infantry, being swarms. But having 12-inch movers in a Tyranid list is a pretty big deal because sometimes, especially on 5 objective missions where with a corner deployment, so you are in one quadrant and there is an objective that ends up being 12 inches off of your quadrant, it's hard to be able to place units that are fast enough to get to that objective without getting killed on the first turn. And if you can spam a couple relatively fast units that can get over there that you don't really care about losing if you go second, that it kind of holds that up. So I ended up with gargoyles, which were fine. I don't love them because they're sort of obnoxious to play with because they're so big. But the unit's large, so it screens well, and they do actions, and they're just a fine unit. So it's okay. For the HQs, I had a Tyranid Prime with direct guidance. He actually had Reaper of Obliterax because I just spent a CP on it in case I needed him to fight anybody. Didn't really end up happening over the course of this event. It did in a couple of my practice games. He had to use it, but it didn't end up making that big of a difference. I had considered swapping it for Gestation Sacks, so I got an extra unit for a CP, essentially, because you can have him spawn some Ripper Swarms. And I might end up doing that, because he rarely gets into combat with that little thing. Warlord was the Neurothrope chat. So I did have a Neurothrope with Resonance Barb and Synaptic Tendrils, a classic combo, so +1 to cast and 2 Warp Siphons every turn, so he can put a Warp Siphon on himself and the Zonethropes or the Hive Tyrant that's in the list. And there's a Hive Tyrant, which I elected to take Maw Claws on instead of Reaper of Obliterax. That's kind of personal preference. I just like Maw Claws a lot. I always find that there's 1 to 2 turns where, I mean, first off, you probably are Voracious Appetiting anytime you have a Reaper of Obliterax Tyrant stuck into somebody. Unless it's like 5 T3 idiots or something and you're just going to murder them. If you're hitting, especially anything you need on need to wound on 3s, but almost anything that you need that has defensive abilities, defensive stratagems, decent and vulnerable saves, you're almost always Voracious Appetiting to ensure you convert all your wound rolls. And Maw Claws just saves you the CP for that because it full rerolls anyway. The hits that go through aren't as impactful because they don't deal extra mortal wounds, so it's not as good at clearing infantry. Or punching through invuln saves, but the number of attacks you get to with Maw Claws is actually wild, because it starts at 6, so it starts at a higher volume than Reaper of Obliterax. It starts to outdamage Reaper once you've gotten 1 to 2 units destroyed with it, and oftentimes your opponent has to feed units into the center. And because this list in particular, because, as I've said, basically the only Psychers are the Hive Tyrant and the Zonethropes, it isn't focused on Psychic phase damage, so it doesn't actually have to shoot like damage into the stuff in the middle, which is the downside of Maw Claws if you're playing like a Maliceptor build with a lot of psychic powers, because the psychic powers hit the dudes you were going to charge the Maw Claw guy, and then he's like, what are you doing, dude? I was going to kill those guys. But in this one, because I can actually direct all my damage wherever I want, the Maw Claw guy just gets to kill whatever's in the center of the table and run away every turn, which means that he soups up to +3 attacks basically every single game. And I think he did fully buff out +3 attacks in every game, at least by the end of the game, which means he was like doing absolutely massive damage, which is like super fun. I think it's just sweet. So it's just pretty cool. With Sky Scasters going on last chance to buy in Forge World, do I think they will be around for much longer? Yeah, I think so. I would be surprised if they like legended them or something. They're probably doing their thing that they announced that they would be doing, where they have like models on rotating schedules where they're only available for short periods of time, essentially. So that's the HQs, and then I just have 1 million infantry units. I talked about the troops. I have 3 units of 5 Raveners and fast attack, which is the reason I didn't take Sky Slasher Swarms is because I filled out the fast attack with Raveners, which are very good. Turns out moving 20 inches with an opportunistic advance. Much nice, yes. I liked that I took Ravener Talons and Scything Talons on them. So no Rending Claws, which I know a lot of people are taking to fight against Armor of Contempt. I never felt like Armor of Contempt was really like problematic for me. And because I was in High Fleet Kraken, the Claws got AP3 anyway. So they force a 3+ save on Armor of Contempt up to a 5+. And with the volume of attacks that Raveners have, that's usually fine. So, plus they shoot you on the way in. So, like, it's so many attacks that it's okay. But really what I wanted to do was maximize attacks to fight against Eldari, because, in my opinion, Eldari is a much greater threat than any of the Armor of Contempt factions. So, I would be building for them over building for any Space Marines. And you can usually just sort of overpower Space Marines, because Tyranid stuff, it turns out, is really efficient. And kind of, it's, like, particularly well-statted to kill Space Marines anyway, because you have a lot of, like, Strength 8-2 damage, which is exactly what kills, you know, like 90% of the Space Marine Codex. I also had some flex picks in there. So I had the support Cadre, I had Zonethropes, Tyrant Guard, Venom Thropes. So I was protecting the Hive Tyrant with the Tyrant Guard, and so he could do whatever he wanted, and then Zonethropes and Venom Thropes. And then I also had some Gene Stealers. The Gene Stealers were sort of the flex for the Sky Slashers. Essentially, I dropped the Sky Slashers I had added initially and a Pyrovore to take 5 Gene Stealers. So I ended up with only 1 Pyrovore in the list, which was fine anyway. And they just give you a little bit of screening, especially against turn 1 deep strikes, so stuff that's going to try to come up and gum you up because it's all foot infantry. You can screen out with the Gene Stealers, and they also help on a lot of missions where you have to be like trading units out in front early. The Gene Stealers are great for that. They're also randomly really good at actions, because especially if you forward deploy them in like an awkward corner somewhere, they can knock 1 data turn like top of 1. And they only fail on a 6 because they're a 5-man and they aren't objective secured, but it's a kind of a safe bet. I don't think I would take a 6-man in there for the Retreat Knock 1 data, because it makes them worse at screening because they have to shrink in. Yeah, why would you need to tech against Space Marines if Tyranids? It's a free win? Maybe against Sisters or Grey Knights? I think maybe Sisters or Grey Knights, but Grey Knights, I guess I haven't played too much against the Grey Knights list that are all that are like Terminator focused, but the Terminator focused lists are so slow, I think you just outmaneuver them anyway. And yeah, the real problem with Space Marines is like the Space Marine list that can shoot you to death, and in that case you don't really care about taking against Armor of Contempt because you are getting killed by guns. So like a Relic Contemptor is a fucking nightmare for this list. I think I just get blown up. That guy kills 5 Raveners every turn nonstop, and we just hope for the best, basically. But against those armies, like, they're usually either a 2+ with a Storm Shield, so you bump up against a 4+ invulnerable save anyway if they're like a Vanguard veteran, or they are, I mean, occasionally it's a Blade Guard, I guess, but they're a 2+ with a 4+ anyway, so that doesn't matter. So, like, I mean, maybe, like, Deathwing Terminators? No, but AP3 is fine, is the best against them anyway, so yeah, it literally doesn't matter. So I guess I think it's a concession to Blood Angels, but I haven't felt like Sanguinary Guard are problematic enough to have to change the build on Raveners. The Raveners have done enough damage to Sanguinary Guard just forcing them on a 4+ regardless, so I haven't really felt it be like that big of a deal. I don't know. Plus you can just like smite Sanguinary Guard and they only get a 5+ usually, which is a little bit sad. So yeah, that's the list, and I really like it. The one downside, and the place I'm trying to find flexes for, is that it gives up no prisoners like it's its job. So despite how powerful the list is offensively, and it has very good board control because everything's fast and can hit pretty hard, none of it's particularly hard to kill because it's all just Tyranid infantry. So it's T5, which is good, and it's a boatload of wounds, but like once you get through the T5, the wounds go away immediately, basically. They don't really have a save. So you end up just bleeding points on no prisoners. So your opponent basically has a maxed secondary every game. And I think like even in games where I basically tabled my opponent, they've gotten like 11 or 12 on no prisoners, kind of no problem. So it's that is a problem. So I think if there was one change I would make, it would be trying to cut the number of wounds available for no prisoners. I don't know what units you cut. Maybe you cut down on Raveners and maybe like the supplemental warrior units, but I'm not 100% sure. And I don't exactly know what I add in either, because the other benefit of this list, as opposed to most of the previous versions of lists that I was playing with, that I really didn't enjoy. So things like the even pre-nerf, the Maliceptor focus lists and the Carnifex focus lists that were in Behemoth, the downside was that you had no play around terrain, because none of your stuff could go through breachable terrain. Very little flew, so you were having to maneuver around buildings and stuff like that. And I think in the last tournament report that I talked about, the one reason I was able to win the tournament that I took Behemoth to was because they had player place terrain where I could put obscuring terrain at an angle I could move through in my deployment zone. So I had safe approaches to the center objectives, whereas what I later learned, basically playing on US Open layouts, was that if you put down like a Carnifex-focused build against something like a Hail of Doom Eldari, you immediately just get killed. You can't hide anything, and Hail of Doom Eldari kills probably 60% of everything that's in its line of sight every turn. So fortunately with this style of list, because everything can go through breachable, you can hide your entire army from Hail of Doom Eldari, and you're still fast enough to have a little bit of threat projection into the center of the table and onto their home objectives. It's not the best threat projection in the world because very little of it is objective secured, but it is still pretty good. I also took Death Leaper. Oops. Goodbye, I guess. That's awkward. My photos just disappeared. All right. Sick. Good shit, I guess. Weird. I don't know, chat. I was playing Death Leaper. Sorry, I'm going to grab my list again. And I was taking Alien Cunning with her because, I don't know, I saw some people having some good results with Death Leaper, so I elected to give her a try. And she ended up being fine, I think. There's a lot of situations where like the ability to be untargetable ranged attacks full stop was pretty good because you could kind of lead with Death Leaper. And if your opponent didn't have good melee or fast ranged attacks, they often couldn't interact with her, which is nice. Anyway, we'll talk about some games. I don't know why my photos keep reordering themselves, but here we are. My game one, I was paired up against Thousand Suns, which was cool. And I do want to give a shout out to my opponent's Thousand Suns army because they had this pre-heresy color scheme, which was absolutely fucking gorgeous. So I really just wanted to show you their super cool Robotic Marines because I was really impressed. I think this is like glazes. It might be contrasted for the armor, but it looks great. And that's what I have to say about that. Now, my opponent's list is really interesting. He was playing with the new Chaos Knights. So he had, it was a battalion detachment. I think he had 4 units of Rubric Marines, 2 Scarab Occult Terminator bricks, a Forge Fiend, which was kind of cool, and then a Dreadblade Chaos Knight with the Blessing of the Dark Master. So the no rerolls against it, and can only be wounded on a 4+. So I was interested to see how that would play out. Now, unfortunately for my opponent, he did take the variety he took was a power fist and a heavy laser destroyer, the big laser cannon, and that build isn't particularly good against me. The power fist is good once it gets into melee, but the big knight's going from move 10 to move 10 or move 12 to move 10 makes them like much more ponderous when trying to get around terrain and stuff. So getting it into melee was a little bit awkward. And then even when it got line of sight to shoot stuff, it was killing like 2 Raveners and then calling it a day. And that's not, I mean, it's a lot of wounds, so it triggered its favorite ability really fast, but that's not really what you want. We are on Recover the Relics, so 6 objectives, 3 on each side of the table, and you only got your Battle Forge CP if you are on an objective at the start of your turn, which is a big benefit for having Gene Stealers, because I had a little Gene Stealer unit. You can't see them, but they were hanging out right in this ruin right here, just giving me a CP on the first turn, which my opponent didn't get, so take that. There you go. 85 points for 1 CP. We did it. We both played relatively conservatively. I think I took Banners. My opponent took Mutate Landscape. I believe he did take no prisoners, which he, I think, ended up maxing out. And then I ended up, I think I also took no prisoners, even though I could only score, I believe, 10 from it, which wasn't great. Or maybe 11 with the bonus point, which wasn't great, but it was something. So, and I took, I have my secondaries written down. I will read them. I ended up with Stranglehold as well, which I wasn't entirely sure about. My opponent ended up with, took no prisoners. He took Mutate Landscape, and he took To the Last. Did we miss that? Can you do that? Did my opponent cheat? Those are the same category, actually, right? Now that I'm thinking about it. Well, good thing I wasn't me doing it. Those are definitely in the same category. Whoopsie daisies. That's okay. So I think he was protecting his knight and his 2 Scarab Occult Terminator bricks, and then also with no prisoners. That's embarrassing. I didn't catch that day of. I am notoriously bad with secondary objective categories. For some reason, I never catch it when they're in the same category. I'm so bad. But unfortunately, it didn't end up making that big of a difference. I ended up going second. My opponent went first, and he played relatively conservatively, which is fair. You don't want to push too far up into a Tyranid army because the amount of damage they can throw out at short range is really, really tough. So he ended up putting 1 Scarab Occult Terminator brick onto this objective. He put 1 Rubric Marine unit onto this objective. I think he made a little bit of a mistake, and he basically had a big Flamer brick, and he ended up, I think, just porting them sort of in the middle of the table here, and I think hoping that I would... He had open lines of fire, so if I charged him, he could overwatch me. But I think he underestimated a little bit my shooting. So I ended up flipping into Guide Mind turn 1, and just pushing up and basically delivering as much damage as I could. I wasn't really sure what to take for my turn 1 imperative, but I've always found that if I don't use Guide Mind early, I'll probably run out of it. And for those who don't know, that's Exploding Sixes to hit when shooting if you're within 24 inches. So that's the Tyranid Prime Synaptic imperative. And I figured that if I had any open targets, it would sort of incentivize my opponent to play cagier, which I think was better for me because I had Banners versus Mutate Landscape. So he pushed up a little bit. He put the Scarab Occult out in the front, and then the rubrics in the center here, like I talked about. I ended up opportunistic advancing warrior unit into this area essentially, and getting a I think I just synaptic linked a synaptic lure into the rubric marine that was on this objective here, and I ended up yeeting the warrior squad in there. I picked +1 to charge for my adaptive ability, blowing up the Rubric Marine squad and then overrunning back behind the ruin so that the return shooting from the Mauler Fiend would be really awkward. Now, fortunately for me as well, I had popped out my Venom Cannons, so I had a couple Venom Cannons in this unit. I had a couple Venom Cannons, I actually think my Venom Cannons in the other Warrior Brick, which are over here, stayed safe. They stayed hidden from the Scarab Cult Terminators, which would definitely kill them. But I had the Venom Cannon from the Tyranid Prime, and I had a bunch of Death Spitters from these guys, and I had one Smite from the Zoanthropes that had pushed out. And they ended up actually just straight up killing the Rubric Marine squad in there, which I think was a little bit above average. I had the Ravener unit rolled like lights out, like a literal god. And then my opponent was just saving on 3s, and I think, or saving on... Yeah, saving on 3s, because they could Armor of Contempt and all of dust away all my AP. So they basically just rolled garbage on their saves. They took like 6 damage from the Ravener unit shooting or something like that with no buffs. It was like, whoa, what's that? That's unlikely. So that I got pretty lucky on the first turn. Was able to clear out this objective, so I scored Stranglehold and was feeling pretty good. My opponent ended up putting some shots into this warrior unit, but I -1 damaged them, and he directed a lot of the fire into the Ravener unit here, and I think he had expected that with the Mauler Fiend, a couple of rubrics, and some sort of ancillary shooting. I think he fired the Knight at the Warrior squad. He would kill them, and unfortunately the Mauler Fiend, I think, pooped its rolling a little bit. The -1 damage hurt it, and I was catalysted, so he ended up leaving 2 warriors alive, which was really good. But he did wipe out the Ravener unit that had moved up in the center. I went up with the Hive Tyrant, and I basically just started bouncing the Hive Tyrant on this flank, this top flank here. So he went up. He had a Rubric squad that was screening for the Scarab Cult squad. The Hive Tyrant went up and just clipped the Rubric squad and left with +D3 attacks. I had opportunistic advanced a Ravener unit up into this objective, and the Raveners and the Warriors were able to clear the Rubric squad that was there to get me Stranglehold for a second turn, and I was basically just racking up Banner's points at this point. My opponent had to push forward all of his Scarab Cult Terminators, his big brick of Scarab Cult Terminators, and he pushed them into range of the Warrior squad that was over there. So the Warriors, a bunch of shooting, the Gene Stealers, and the Hive Tyrant. After a couple rounds of just dealing sort of chip damage to the Scarab Cult squad, I had been firing Death Spitters at them, and I had been smiting them with the Hive Tyrant and the Zoanthropes repeatedly. Although I think the Zoanthropes eventually got vaporized by that Chaos Knight. I had sort of whittled them down, and then I was able to basically dive on them with everything and eventually kill them. So that was the Scarab Cult squad down. He had his smaller squad remaining in the back, as well as the Chaos Knight, but he had, at that point, lost all his Rubric Marines and was only down to the single Scarab Cult squad. And then I didn't take any more pictures. But basically, towards the late game, we were trading back and forth on primary objective as the retrieval mission, recover the relics, is kind of wont to be. And my opponent had been getting 8 every turn plus kills, and I had been also getting 8, but eventually I was able to basically push him off this objective. Or actually, I think I just pushed him off this objective and prevented him from holding it with my own OBSEC for a while. And so that clipped me to a couple 12s. So I was able to max my primary. My banners almost maxed. My opponent did get... he used an Umbralific Crystal to port his Scarab Cult squad into here. He fired and killed, I think, a couple of the Gargoyle unit, and then he actually ended up just getting a big charge into these guys to clip out that objective. But I was able to sort of hit those guys with the remainder of my shooting and stuff, and was able to kill them. He did, at the last turn, he did march in the last 2 turns, he marched the Chaos Knight up the middle of the table because it had maxed its favorite ability, because I have so many wounds on the table. And then pushed right up the table and actually just made a big charge into my Neurothrope and made it. But the Neurothrope's just so stupid hard to kill. He just biffed the attack and didn't die, which is good on you, little buddy. Ended up just staying there to pin him from piling consolidating into anything else. And I think I ended up just leaving the Knight alone and clipping out the rest. So my opponent had 1 to the last. As it only got the 3 mutates in his own deployment zone and got a bunch of no prisoners, which in hindsight he probably shouldn't have been able to do because we took 2 of the same secondary. Oopsies! But I basically only ended up missing out on the points from no prisoners that I couldn't have scored. So I ended with a 94-point win, which felt pretty good, although my opponent was still able to score 78. So certainly feeling that I gave up a lot of points. I believe that basically everything in here got clipped out eventually, and I had to come in with the second Ravener unit and to basically just wrap everything up. The Hive Tyrant continued to just waddle around and blow people up, which was pretty cool, which is mostly what he did all day because that guy's a freaking champ. But the rest of my army was pretty whittled down. I had just basically the support stuff that was hiding in the back. I had like the Pyroboar, Death Leapers chilling in the back, and then the Venom Thropes, essentially. And that was game 1. So it felt pretty good. Shaking some... getting a little bit used to the list, and got a pretty interesting matchup to round 1. It was cool to see the Chaos Knight in Thousand Suns not breaking the detachment abilities, but I think it does help Thousand Suns a little bit because it gives it like a big long-range gun to shoot, because Thousand Suns oftentimes they're so reliant on the short range, like teleporting bricks, that sometimes they lose out on like just having a big thing that they can shoot downrange. The problem is right now we're in such a lethal metagame that no one is building to stand out in the open and trade shots with people, which is where the Mauler Fiend and the Chaos Knight really excel. So like my army is gonna everything's gonna be outside line of sight, and then I'm gonna trade one thing with my opponent every turn for basically the entire game. So they had very few opportunities to just go ham and shoot at people, which is really what he wanted to do, which I think definitely ended up hurting. And that put me to round 2. There's my beautiful army hiding bravely behind a wall. Please don't hurt us. Because round 2, I was playing against Eldar. Yay. So this is against Ian, who is a community, a Discord member. He plays on the Discord channel. ! Discord if you're not in there. And he and I actually had played a game in person last week that I was posting about, where we played basically the exact same lists against each other. And as it turned out, we played exactly the same mission. This was on Death and Zeal, so we had our corner deployments like this, and 5 objectives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we were, and the objectives locked in if you had OBSEC on them and stuff. But in the game that we played out, we ended up actually just tying. So when we got paired up against each other again, we were like, oh man, wouldn't it be funny if we tied? And wouldn't it be funny if we played the exact same mission? And then we did. So we were like, that's interesting. So I took a long and hard look at my secondary objectives for this game, because the last time I'd taken some meme picks the last time I played against Ian. I took a Cranial Feasting, I think, because he had a lot of Exarch units and stuff. The downside with Cranial Feasting is that it disincentivizes you from maximizing your damage output, because your opponent can pull their Exarchs early, and so that you don't trigger it. So, like, for example, if they have a Dire Avenger unit and you're going to charge them with a bunch of Raveners, the Raveners could shoot the Dire Avengers and then charge them. But if I shoot the Dire Avengers, he pulls the Exarch to the gunshots, and then when I charge him, I can't kill his unit champion. So I don't score. And that's very sad. So I ended up, because that was a league game, I didn't feel so bad about taking a suboptimal secondary, but I really like that one. I think it's cool. But I ended up taking some different ones instead. I put the objective over the terrain. Yeah, so on the US Open, the bricks, if you don't have like the acrylic base, you just can't see the objective underneath the terrain. So we ended up putting the objectives over the terrain. Yeah, it would be impossible to find them, I think, if you put them underneath. Like these, they just get entirely covered. And this one in the corner specifically had like a little wall where the objective marker itself was supposed to go. So it would have been difficult to put a marker down. I think we did end up replacing this one with a marker later on, but my opponent's little wall was not quite as big, so I guess it wasn't that big of an issue. So I ended up taking Stranglehold, which is my opponent and I both took Stranglehold, which I think is pretty reasonable. I took Warp Ritual, which I wasn't sure about, but I knew that if I took Psychic Interrogation, which I typically don't hate against against Eldari, because they can often play aggressively with their Phoenix Lords, and the Phoenix Lords don't have a deny built in, so you can pull out of the dispel range, the deny the witch range of the Farseers, and then you can interrogate the Phoenix Lords specifically. I wasn't so sure about that because I figured that my Hive Tyrant would have to be going and doing stuff. So I knew that my opponent, he actually only had the one Phoenix Lord. He just had Behareth. So he could play super cagey with Behareth and make it very difficult for me to score a Psychic Interrogation. So I wasn't so sure about that one. So I ended up with Warp Ritual because I knew that my opponent would have to come to the center. And if my opponent came to the center, I could yo-yo off of whatever he put in the middle. And already I'm happy to do that because it powers up the Maw Claws. But on top of that, it also puts me in a position to Warp Ritual, which is pretty good. And then I think the controversial pick is I took Investigate Signals. Investigate Sites, Investigate Signals, I think, is the current version. So it's an action performed wholly within 6 inches of the center of the table. So not on the center objective, but around it. With a 3 model or larger infantry unit that completes at the end of your turn if there are no enemy units within 6 inches of the center. Now, both of mine and my opponent's armies are going to trade units back and forth because neither of us can survive each other's attacks. So I figure I'm going to kill everything in the middle of the table every turn. And because I have to be going up and scoring Stranglehold anyway, I don't feel so bad about throwing my own infantry up in there. So I figured that this would be a good one. I also had, when I was considering it, I figured eventually I would have depleted Ravener units. I have the Gargoyles, which are relatively fast, and I have the 2 3-man warrior squads who can trade for the Investigates. So I figured that it was pretty safe 9er, and there was a universe where I could score the max 15 on it. So I was pretty happy about that. But I've literally never taken that secondary before, so it was pretty interesting. My opponent ended up going first. I placed as conservatively as I could, so I had the, you can kind of see them a little bit in the side of the screen here. My overlay's a little bit in the way, but there's Gargoyles in the dense cover that's over here. It's on the US Open layout, so the small terrain features in the cardinal points were all dense cover. I had the Pyrovore over there as well. I had Death Leaper kind of up in the middle because these were all units that could run up and obsec out this top left objective on turn 1 if I needed them to. Death Leaper is actually kind of a nightmare for this Eldar list. They don't really have super good answers for her because they have a tough time shooting her. And there's a potential that she can... she kind of messes up their... attack activation if they want to just like send Behareth in because she can fight first. So she could potentially phase cap Behareth if he sinks into her, and she's hard for him to kill because of the -1 into a 4+ invul and a bunch of wounds. So she's felt really good in this matchup. Plus she can deploy aggressively and they can't really shoot her on turn 1, which is really good. Unfortunately, I did have one warrior unit I had to deploy in line of sight, and so my opponent went first. He pushed up a couple of his guns. Let's see if I have a good picture of what he did. Not really. But he pushed up a Behareth up in the middle because he could. He had a Viper up in the middle, and I think he ran up maybe some bikes or something, and he fired everything into that warrior unit and depleted them down to 3 models, so killed 3 of them. I had the Gene Stealers deployed in this bottom corner here, such that my opponent couldn't, excuse me, couldn't deploy Rangers on the objective. And the reason for that is that this mission, if you have obsec units on the objectives at the end, the center objectives that aren't in your deployment zones, at the end of the turn, then you lock the objective and hold it permanently until your opponent takes it. So if my opponent is able to deploy, using their forward deploy Rangers on the objective, then as soon as his turn flips, as long as the Rangers don't move, he locks the objective, and he doesn't need to babysit it quite as hard for the rest of the game. So I wanted to put Gene Stealers there so he couldn't lock it, and he would have to then like hold it naturally, basically. So yeah. Anyway, that's what we did. My opponent went first. He killed all the Gene Stealers, which is like, you know, it is what it is. But it did force him to push up some bikes and Vipers, so I think I got some line of sight to some stuff. I ended up opportunistic advancing a Ravener unit. You can see one of the Raveners off in the corner here. into this objective with all the buffs on them. So the full wombo combo is reroll once to hit from the Hive Tyrant, reroll once to wound from the Tyranid Prime, and +1 to hit from direct guidance on the Tyranid Prime. So they're hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s to hit, wounding on 3s, rerolling 1s to wound. So they almost full convert their attacks essentially. I don't think I picked a Synaptic Imperative on turn 1 because I figured my opponent wasn't going to give me anything to shoot, and I wasn't going to be committing hard enough to warrant the Neurothrope Imperative. Actually, I picked the Zoanthrope Imperative, excuse me. I picked the Neurothrope Imperative, and in case my opponent Eldritch Stormed me, basically. In case he ended up trying to get like an aggressive Doom off, I would get +1 to deny it. I should mention as well, my opponent actually took banners, so another reason to try to disrupt control of this objective on the side here was that if my opponent drops banners on it early, then if I can have a unit in there that can contest it for as long as possible, I cut that banner score really low. So I ended up actually not even taking the center objective on my first turn. I yeeted the Raveners over here. I killed... I actually don't think I killed a Viper. I dropped a Viper to 1 wound, I think. And then I killed all the Rangers that were there, which is good. I overcommitted into the Rangers to make sure they died. So that broke my opponent's OBSEC on that objective, so that also broke his banner there. That held me that objective. I just put the Warriors here. They just moved up basically as far as they could to get Investigate Signals. The Hive Tyrant went in, killed a Viper that was in the middle, tried a Warp Ritual, and it got denied, which is very sad, even with Warp Siphon and +1 to cast, which was like, that was my turn to get Warp Ritual the first time, I think, but then just overran back into the Ruin, and then we called it good, basically, and we continued in this sort of similar style for a little while. I did end up picking up the small bike squad that had peeked out over here to shoot at my Raveners. And I was able to get some pot shots and some really clutch Neuroparasites into some concentrated bricks of my opponent. So I ended up killing a lot of Dire Avengers and Guardians with Neuroparasites. The subsequent turn, I went in with the second warrior unit, the second 3-man warrior unit to complete and investigate signals. My opponent had a second Viper up in the middle there, and the Hive Tyrant killed it and ran away. So basically the same thing happening every turn. But he was starting to peek out a little bit with some of his units to get shots, and then wasn't able to quite battle focus as far back as he needed to. So I was starting to be able to get some shooting into his army to whittle it down. I also set up a little bit aggressively here. I had the gargoyles here so that every unit was wholly within 18 of the middle, so that the gargoyle unit could perform an investigate signal if I needed it to. And I also had my warrior unit that had been depleted after the shooting on turn 1, wholly within 12 inches of the middle, so they could complete the investigate signal too. So I was setting up, I was keeping everything as close to my chest as possible, but setting up to complete as many investigate signals as possible, because I knew going second, I had already disrupted my opponent's banner score early. He had to drop a banner with Behareth on turn 2 in order to start to get his banner score back up. So as long as I could complete my ritual, max out my investigate signals, I was going to be up, and I had bottom round 5 scoring to compound that. Now, unfortunately for me, things did not go entirely as planned. My opponent, I was able to get my Warp Ritual off turn 2 with Warp Siphon, but my opponent denied it rounds 3 and 4. So the Hive Tyrant only completed it on round 5 in the center of the table to get a total of 7 points in the secondary rather than 12, which was, I think, pretty unlikely because I had Warp Siphon, so I had a cast bonus, and my opponent doesn't have a bonus to deny. He was playing Hail of Doom and Masterful Shots, not Children of Prophecy. So it was a little frustrating. I was like, that's a lot of points that I don't get. I ended up on round 3 pushing pretty hard for the middle of the table. Because I had bottom of the turn, I believe I picked Tyranid Prime Imperative, so Guide Mind, for the exploding 6s to maximize my shooting for a turn. I clipped out a couple of bikes with a Venom Cannon shot. I killed... My opponent had pushed up pretty heavy. He had sent a Howling Banshee squad in that got smited to death. He had towed his last Viper onto the objective, and he had sent in his Dire Avengers and a Ranger squad to push for the center objective in the future. I ended up killing all that stuff. flying back with a Hive Tyrant round 3, and then because my opponent was going first, I could immediately trigger the the Zoanthrope Imperative, excuse me, for the invulnerable save. Now, my opponent did this turn, however, proc an Eldritch Storm. So he Eldritch Stormed from his Farseer in the building right on top of this warrior, basically, which hit all of my warriors. So my 2 warrior bricks, the Zoanthropes, the Tyrant Guard, the Venom Thropes, and the Hive Tyrant all got hit by the Eldritch Storm. So it did reduce his shooting for a turn, but it did blast a bunch of mortal wounds into my army. And it ended up killing a Venom Thrope in the Psychic phase, which was a little bit annoying because I had Venom Thropes positioned to protect the unit that had been investigating signals, the depleted unit in the center here, and the Raveners. And because one of them died, I ended up pulling this one so that throughout the shooting phase, both of those units would be protected by the Zoanthrope, or by the Venom Thropes, excuse me. And then in the morale phase, I would have to pull one to Coherency, which felt pretty bad, but wasn't the end of the world. I also lost a Hive Guard there, or a Tyrant Guard there, excuse me, which is a little bit annoying as well because I had positioned the Tyrant Guard to be in range to complete Investigate signals. My opponent had also, the turn previous to this, I had positioned all the gargoyles in the building, and my opponent had gotten line of sight, I think with his big Shuriken Cannon brick, and just vaporized that squad, so I couldn't investigate with that unit. So I was quickly running out of investigate signals units, essentially, because the Zoanthropes and the Tyrant Guard could no longer do it because they were depleted, and I had sent all my warriors into the middle, basically. Fortunately, let's see if we can... Yeah, I got a picture of the aftermath here. Because I had triggered the Zoanthrope Imperative, the invulnerable save saved me a little bit. My opponent peeled out with a Dire Avenger squad. He fired into the unit that was over here, the Ravener unit that moved up, and ended up not being able to kill them because of the invulnerable save, which was pretty clutch. He did, with the Shuriken Cannon Bike Squad, fire into the Warriors, though, and just rinsed them. Absolutely annihilated the unit. I think I had lost enough to the Bow of Kurnos and random Shuriken attacks that I didn't end up -1 damaging them. But I failed an astronomical number of 5-ups because they had the 5-up invuln save and a 5-up damage ignore from Catalyst. And I think I had basically taken, like, just full taken all of the damage from all the shooting going in. So the chances, even if I had reinforced Hive Node them to reduce the damage on the Shuriken Cannon bikes, the chances of the unit surviving were so low I ended up not spending the CP to do it. Which was good because I think he overkilled them, like, monumentally. Which I was a little bit upset about. I had like set up in this defensive position, but the Hail of Doom Eldar army is too lethal. They just kill basically everything in line of sight. But that did mean that I had this unit of Raveners remaining, and they were able to complete my 4th Investigate signals. So this is turn 4. My opponent at this point only had 4 points on Banner. He was looking good on No Prisoners, because he took that, of course, and was going to max it out. And we were probably both going to blank on Stranglehold. So things were looking a little bit dicey here, because I was entirely depleted of units that could investigate signals. And my warp rituals had been denied, essentially, almost entirely. So moving into round 5, my opponent was like, my casualties and stuff don't matter now, so here we go. He pushed really hard to clear this unit out, just in case I could get them into range to investigate signals, but they were not within 18 of the center, so they couldn't have performed the action. He clipped out these guys, he clipped out the Zoanthropes, and basically just ran his whole army to the middle. And after mathing the points out, we realized that my opponent was down a couple points on primary because he'd been cut on primary on round 1 because I had sent the Raveners into his bottom right objective. And he never had a 12er because he was going first. So he had a tough time holding 3 objectives to my 2. So I was going to max primary if I held the 12er on the bottom of round 5. We were both going to max Stranglehold. He was going to max No Prisoners, and at the end of the game, get a 10 on, get an 8 on Banners, for a total of 90 points, I believe. On my end, I'd been cut on Warp Ritual, and I was down 3 on Investigate Sites, which meant I was going to score, I believe only 89, was how the breakdown ended. So all I had, basically what I had to do, so I was losing by 1 point. What I had to do on my last turn, because I had no hope of scoring any of my other secondaries besides getting my Stranglehold, which I would do. What I had to do was break a single banner on my opponent's side, and he had banners on these 2 back objectives. And if I did that, the game tied. So what we ended up doing, I had to send the Tyrant into the middle of the table to Warp Ritual. Thank goodness he finally got his frigging Warp Ritual off for the second time, so we got our 7 points on that, which was good. And then I opportunistic advanced the Death Leaper, who was hiding inside this building, into the middle of the table, so right over here. And I charged both Death Leaper and the Hive Tyrant into the Warlock unit that was there. I bounced an Onslaught from the Neurothrope way in the back, boop, 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 all the way to the Death Leaper. Death Leaper, or the Hive Tyrant turned the Warlock unit into tiny pieces of tiny chunks. He was maxed on attacks, so just 1,000 attacks going into 2 Warlocks ended up killing them. Death Leaper piling consolidated and then triggered an overrun to go to my opponent's home objective to score me 3 objectives to my opponent's 2. I got my 12 points on primary, and I blanked his banner. And we ended up with an 89-89 tie again. So the second game, we played the same matchup on the same map, and we tied both times. And in both times, we had taken different secondary selections. My opponent had taken Retrieve Knockman Data the first time around. This time he took banners. And I took Warp Ritual Investigate Sites, and we tied again. Fortunately, though, it was a really high-scoring tie, which, especially in terms of an RTT, is almost as good as a win, because your final scoring is basically on, it's wins first, but then battle points. So I was still going to score higher than all of the X and 1s if I won my third game, but because the points were so high, I was probably still going to be higher than anyone who was 2 and X, essentially, assuming that they didn't score quite as high. So, good stuff. Turns out, Tyranids and Hail of Doom Eldari, perfectly matched up. Now, this matchup's really interesting, and I don't know how much it's been spoken about in the discourse of the game right now, but the matchup's really interesting because, these are the top 2 armies in the upper echelon of the game, right? These are the 2 best armies, full stop. And both of them are relatively similar in that their ability to suffer damage is not incredible. Tyranids are obviously much better at it than Eldar. But, it's a lot of 4+. It's a lot of 4+ armor saves going around on both sides. So, Tyranids are a boatload of wounds, but like we talked about earlier, the wounds disappear very quickly. And Eldar are just, their defensive stats are not good. But both of them are hyper lethal. So it's 2 fast armies with units that straight up just kill one another if they can see each other, basically. Eldar just kill Tyranid units in shooting. Tyranid units can attrition Eldar units and then also kill them in melee. So the game ends up being sort of this almost perfect chess match where you and your opponent just compare like the assets you have available to each other, and then you go back and forth trading those pieces until the game is over. And I think it's a matchup that almost regardless of like sort of the power level of the factions, I'm not sure that I would say that like, this is a matchup that's going to tie often because these 2 armies are so close in power level. I think that's part of it. But I think the way that the 2 armies play is so similar that it's going to engender a lot of very close games and ties, probably. Because there's 2 armies that are basically trying to do the exact same things, and anytime they make a move, their opponent immediately counters it. So they're just sort of like equal and opposite, I guess, and they cancel out. And so far, I think that's been my experience. I'd be curious to hear what other people have who have played this matchup. But it is certain the Hell of Doom Eldari especially is like certainly super duper brutal to play against. So yeah, I was happy to have built a Tyranid list that can fight up against it. Still unsure of how I scored the victory there. I did have this Ravener unit back here that was playing kind of conservatively and was trying to kill this Dire Avenger unit. But in the last turn of the game, this Ravener unit's positioning didn't actually matter. And if I had them placed more aggressively, so that they could push up to try to investigate signals on the final turn, I could have won instead of having them basically just stand there. But most of my army didn't do anything on the final turn because the only thing that mattered was getting Death Leaper to my opponent's objective. So there were probably some slight positioning I could have done better, but I think I played it pretty well, obviously, all things considered. And I do appreciate a game of 40k that's like that, where it does actually come down to, you know, very specifically the moves you make on the table. I also would have liked to have gotten a Warp Ritual off before the final turn of the game, which the odds are in the Hive Tyrant's favor to get the 3 Warp Ritual offs out of 5, but it was unfortunate my opponent rolled so high on denies. But that put me to the final game. So my final game, because I was 2-0-1, I was up against a 1-1. So it was kind of a crapshoot what the final game would end up looking like. And I think, unfortunately for my opponent, I got a relatively newer player who was playing Space Wolves, and he had an all Primaris Space Wolves army, which was very cool. And it was also painted in this gorgeous Space Wolves gray with black bases, as you can see. One of the greatest color schemes ever devised. Absolutely glorious. I mean, generally speaking, I think the list my opponent was playing was not, like, you know, sort of hyper optimized, especially to fight against the stuff that I had. And when you're 100% Primaris, that can happen. You miss out on a lot of stuff if you're taking out Primaris units. So I ended up just sort of pushing to get the maximum score that I could. I went first. I pushed the Gene Stealers up to... We were on... secure missing artifacts, so the priority targets reskin. So the objectives moved around and stuff. We picked our opponent's priority objectives. I think I took Warp Ritual again because my opponent had 1 Psyker. And I ended up... Oh, I didn't write down my secondaries. I took Warp Ritual. I think I took No Prisoners again, and I took Stranglehold. I rocketed the Gene Stealers out to score the middle objective turn 1. I had a cheeky Death Leaper over here, holding down the objective while being unshootable. Good stuff like that. And basically just played super cagey. The Hive Tyrant went out and scored a Warp Ritual and charged into a unit of infiltrators that were hiding behind a building, and they ran away. So I had basically begun scoring that, and that was sort of the tenor of the game for the most part. My opponent pushed forward. He had a big Repulsor. The Repulsor ran up in the middle with a bunch of Blagar veterans and his characters in it. I round 2 procced the... Exploding Sixes, the Godmind Imperative, and fired 1,000 Death Spitters and a bunch of Venom Cannons into it. And between that and the Psychic powers, we eventually blew up the tank, pushed a Warrior Squad into the middle. The Hive Tyrant got, I think, a unit of Intercessors that was standing out over here and then ran back. And we basically continued that for the remainder of the game. Until... it was over. So I ended up scoring out. I missed a couple points on No Prisoners because I think my opponent's army was only worth like 14 or so. And I ended up with I want to say a second 94-point win. Let me see if I have the score here. But at the end of the day, that ended up with me. It was a second 94-point win. So I had an 89-point draw and then 2 94-point wins, which is a pretty good score, all things considered. And that ended up putting me in second place. I was able to leap my opponent from round 2, who had also gone 2-0-1. I was able to score a couple more points more than him, and ended up not in first because I had a draw on my record, but we still got second, which was almost as good. But yeah, it was a little bit of an interesting round 3 because I think my opponent's list was I think mostly just models that he had, so it was going to be a little bit tough. Some interesting things did happen. He did have heavy Intercessors with Executor Bolters, and they're really good at killing like Raveners and stuff. They just wound on 4s, and then the shot, if they're I think they're AP 2, so you save on 6s and then plinks for 2 damage. So they probably kill like 2 in the shooting phase, and then they and that's pretty obnoxious. So they ended up killing this one unit of heavy Intercessors that was sitting in the back here. Ended up killing basically an entire Ravener unit shooting, and then I charged it with a Warrior Squad, and I was depleted, and he transhuman through the charge, Gene Rot Might, and just like plowed the The warrior unit super hard with like a really big roll. Rolled a bunch of 6s that exploded into auto wounds and basically killed the warrior unit in response, which is pretty exciting. So if there is anything about this style of Tyranid's army, it certainly loses models pretty quickly. So, you know, at least both players are doing something. And my opponent did end up killing, I think, almost all the Raveners and one and a half of the warrior bricks, I think, by the end of the game. Which is pretty respectable, I think. Pretty good. We did end up the game with the Redemptor Dreadnought having a big duel with the Hive Tyrant, and the Hive Tyrant did like 20 damage to it, which is pretty cool because he was full up on the Maw Claws were fully powered. But that was my tournament. So feeling pretty good about it. Liked taking the Kraken to the table, but I can definitely feel that, especially against like the Eldar armies. I don't feel bad at all. It definitely feels like Tyranids are on the same level as that. But against the not Eldar armies, it does feel like, I think you're probably about 10% up on like assets from your opponent. So I think if you see maybe a 10% points bump, I think Tyranids would look a lot better. It feels to me like the third Ravener unit is kind of like I almost could not have it, and the games wouldn't have changed too much. It was like it's like you just have extra models for no reason. And I think that you could probably cut 200 to 250 points from a list like this. And it might actually make the list better because it doesn't give up as many points on no prisoners. So that's what I would expect to see down the road from a potential Munitorum Field Manual update. What was my take on the Forge Fiend on the table? It feels like it costs too much. I don't know what it costs. The damage output is appreciable. It didn't feel like it did nothing. I think the downside for me was that if you engage it, it doesn't do anything. And I think right now what you'll find is because the best factions in the game are fast factions. What are they? Oh, they're freaking cheap, dude. I guess they're only strength 7, which is a downside. They're 125 with the ectoplasma. Oh, no, you have to pay for each ectoplasma. Just kidding. Right? So you take... So they're actually like 160. It has 2 Hades autocannon. So he had ectoplasma cannons on it for the 3 damage, which I think is the right call. Although you can fire the Hades autocannons in melee. It's only 4 shots, though. It's so weird. All right. For 25 points? Why? That one is too expensive. I'll agree with that. So it's 45 points, so 155? Yeah, that's probably a little pricey. I thought that... I thought the biggest downside for me wasn't necessarily the damage output, but it was the ability to fire. And I think that's what we're going to be seeing for a while because, like I said, the best factions in the game are super fast right now. So we're going to hit this meta game where like it's going to be like a no line of sight meta game where just everything like no one's taking models that can't be hidden basically. I know I've been considering putting a Harpy in my list, and I'm like not sure about it because there's so many matchups where if you take the Harpy, it immediately if you go second, it's just dead. It's just you just pull it right off the table. And it's similar situations like that where this unit, is going to be running into armies that just have nothing for it to shoot its guns at, and that was basically how that game went. It got to fire its guns once because I engaged it, and my opponent was able to smite it out of engagement and shoot, and then it fired once into a warrior unit that was already like running at it. So I was unimpressed for that reason, but I think the amount of damage it does for 155 like isn't terrible. It was fine. I wouldn't take it for 170, but it's not 170, right? It's 155. Which is okay. I wish the strength on the plasma was higher. It's kind of weird that it's like it's only 7. But can you buff it with the Infernal Master? Can you go to strength 8 with his buff, his +1 strength thing? Or does he give you? No, he. It's the psychic power that gives you +1 strength, right? Empiric Surge. Is that right? No. I don't know what the psychic power for +1 strength is called. Whatever. It doesn't matter that much. Anyway, let's talk about some lists, chat. We got some interesting results from the last week of 40k tournaments, so that's the next thing that I want to cover. So we'll go over to our friends at DGI, and we'll do some talking. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about, as we have just done for the last like 40 minutes or so, the last hour, is talk about Tyranids, because I do think that it's pretty interesting to take a look at the evolution of Tyranids from the post-nerf. Just make sure everyone can see my screenshot here. There it is. So while we are seeing probably zoom out, I think. Oh, we're zoomed in a lot. All right, that makes so much sense. While we are seeing a lot of lists sticking with the classic Leviathan and then focusing on like the big warrior bricks, we are also seeing a lot of lists move to other high fleets. And I think KRAKEN, in my opinion, KRAKEN is the best one. And we did see Matt Evans from Storm of Silence go 5-0 with a KRAKEN Tyranid list. Matt Evans, who I have done a video on this channel about before, and he has Power of the Hive Mind, I think is his YouTube channel. You can go check him out, and I'm sure he's talked about his games over there. But he was the first person, I think, to win a GT with the IAC Harridan, which is pretty sick. So congratulations to him, and I did a whole video about it. But he is also playing High Fleet KRAKEN, and he's playing this double Pyrovore Tyrannocyte Wombo combo over here, which I think I appreciate. I think that seems pretty good. I'm a little bit worried about playing Tyrannocytes right now because of Eldar, because you can't drop effectively into a lot of Eldar. So I'm a little bit wary of that. But he is taking big warrior squads, and we are using KRAKEN to push the warrior squads super far with opportunistic advance, and that all seems pretty good. Otherwise, it's mostly normal Tyranid stuff. We got one Harpy, one Parasite of Mortrex. So not taking a Death Leaper, but that's... Oh, no, we do have a Death Leaper with Alien Cunning. Oh, no, without Alien Cunning. We have both Death Leaper and Parasite. Dang, okay, well, all right, fair enough. But we are almost filled up on elites here, although the Tyrant Guard and the Zone Thrips are free, so we actually do have 2 slots if we wanted to take more stuff in there. But otherwise, I don't know if I'm like super shocked about anything in this style of KRAKEN list. Mostly we're taking the Warriors over the Raveners, but I do like that it plays a bunch of different unit types, so we're not focused so much on the infantry, so we don't run into that problem quite as much where it gives up like mad no prisoners all day. But we do see there are some other interesting ones here. For example, I believe that we had a Jormungandr list. Yeah, this was a sub 28 player person event, so we only put the #1 list in here. Charlie Andre won with KRAKEN. Yeah, that was pre-nerf. That was like a different situation, I think. So we're seeing some other Tyranid Hive fleets start to creep in. So we have Jormungandr with spamming Carnifexes. So you can give all of the Carnifexes and stuff objective secured because it's a Lurk Biomorphology subfaction. And then the other fun thing about the Carnifexes is that you can deep strike big chunks of them for a CP with the Jormungandr strat. So we could be just dropping mad Carnifexes on the table with Tyrannifexes. So this is like sort of insane heavy shooting. And I wouldn't be surprised to learn if this like metagame was relatively open on terrain because you have a lot of like gunshots you can use. We also just didn't take Venom Thropes, which is interesting. But although the Jormungandr, it gives light cover, right? But I don't believe it gives dense to monsters, right? Maybe I'm wrong. Let me double check, actually. Jormungandr is... Oh, it is dense if you're more than 18. Okay, just kidding. But it just gets shorter if you're more than 12. So you'd have to buy Sporces to get light cover for them, but that's probably fine. So you don't need Venom Thropes, I guess. But you can drop a big unit of Carnifexes if you need to, or if you have big line of sight, you can just have the Carnifexes stand on the objectives and be OBSEC, and that's kind of fun. But the other thing that I think is important to talk about is, obviously, we do have a lot of Asuryani winners as well, which is to be expected. But we did have, from Bay Area Open, we had our nice Adepta Sororitas coming out of the woodwork here. So a lot of interesting... At BAO, we had a lot of interesting results. It was won by Jesse Sal playing Adepta Sororitas, and I know there was like a little bit of an asterisk there because there were some like rules kerfuffles, especially within the top 8, I believe, which is a little bit awkward, but it is what it is, and I guess, you know, he got... The judges were cool with it, so there you go. But we also had Stephen Box coming out with Blood Angels, which I think have sort of cemented themselves as the best Armor of Contempt, or I wouldn't say the best Armor of Contempt faction, but the best Space Marine sub-faction, which came right out of nowhere. Although I'm sure there's a lot of people who are pretty excited about that. Not 100% sure that you know, that's too surprising once the Armor of Contempt change was made known. But given how terrible Blood Angels were before anything changed, it is a little bit surprising. But we also had a Chaos Knights in the top 8. So a lot of interesting lists to take a look at. We can take a look at Jesse's Adepta Sororitas list here. This is a nice classic Bloody Rose list. So we're taking advantage of the Bloody Rose supplement. We have a Canoness with Word of the Emperor, so they ignore invuln saves, and the 3 damage Relic Blade, Blade of Saint Eleanor. We have Celestine and Morven Ball making their appearances, a couple Battle Sister squads, a Dogmata, and then I think the coolest inclusion is the 3 Paragon Warsuits. And at this point, if you're a Sisters player, I know you're not that shocked about the Paragon Warsuits post Armor of Contempt making an appearance, but I know that for a lot of people who aren't too familiar with Sisters, this is a little bit surprising because Paragon Warsuits have been much maligned for a really long time. Basically, since they've come out, people have been like basically poo-pooing this unit as garbage. But for those who don't know, we can take a quick look at their data sheet, because once you take them into account alongside Armor of Contempt, their data sheet is actually relatively impressive. So with a multi-melta built in, they're 80 points per model. So for 80 points, you get a 4-wound T5 chassis that has -1 damage built in. So they're basically like a unit of dreadnoughts. And they have a base 2+ armor save. Outside of their Shield of Faith, they don't have a built-in invulnerable save. But like we've seen people have been finding with Terminators, you don't necessarily need an invulnerable save if your armor save is high enough with a 2+ save plus Armor of Contempt. So they're basically a 1+ armor save. That's the reason that Blood Angels have also been doing well, because of their Sanguinary Guard, and it's the reason that Terminators have like a new lease on life, because they have a 1+ armor save on top of that. So you get a 1+ armor save, just like Terminators, so everyone's excited about. You get 4 wounds rather than 3 wounds, which is great, and you get -1 damage. So pretty good stuff. Their melee profile is also not too bad. They have usually they take the Warblade, so they +1 attack, so they go to 5 attacks on the charge with the Bloody Rose bonus at Strength 6, AP 4, 2 damage, which is pretty solid. I do think that we're probably going outside of a couple matchups. We are in a situation where 2 damage is kind of not going to be the greatest thing ever, but the flip side is taking a 3 damage weapon that gives you -1 to hit, and that's probably not that good. And on top of that, they're core keyworded, so they can get all of the core keyword buffs. They also get a special stratagem from Bloody Rose that gives them exploding 4s on units of 6 or more in melee. So if you are running into some armies like, I know this is probably a popular one with people who are familiar with the with the 40k YouTube sphere. We did see Skari take a top 3 at a GT with the new Connoisseurs of Pain Army of Renown, so the Homunculus Coven Army of Renown with massive amounts of racks. So if you are facing up against those armies like that, we do have exploding 4s on top of your +1 attack and potentially full rerolls from Morvenball can put a lot of damage out with 2 damage weapons, which is going to be pretty solid against units with a damage ignore roll. Which is pretty good. So that's it. So that's pretty sweet. We also have a Repentia squad. I do like the inclusion. We have a Repentia squad alongside a Sororitas Rhino. So the Rhino can use, there's a stratagem in Bloody Rose to pregame move the Rhino. So you can pregame move the Rhino to Alpha Strike with the Sisters Repentia squad, or you can use it to slingshot the Repentia squad and then reload it with the Retributors if you want to push extra threat range on them. The Retributors have the Combi Flamer so that they can trigger Holy Trinity, because they have a Flamer, Bolt, and Melta weapon. So if they all target the same unit with those, or if they target the same unit, I think while holding all those weapons, they'll trigger the stratagem, which is pretty cool. And then we have a lot of Seraphim and Zephyrim and 5 Model Sisters Repentia units that we can use to trade for objectives. So I'd be interested to see whether or not we see Adeptus Sororitas continue this sort of upward trend. They've slowly but surely been pushing up the table. Also there's multi-meltas on the on the Faragon Warseeds chat for sure. Absolutely. So I'd be interested to see whether or not Adeptus Sororitas can sort of continue doing that well. I'm certainly pulling for them, and I imagine that there's a universe where, in a world where people start rotating towards Imperial and Chaos Knights because they're the new codexes, Sisters of Battle get a sort of artificial bump up because they can they trade with Knights so favorably. They've always been like the Knight killer because they're just like a unit of Retributors with full rerolls from Morvenball will just like dirt most of a Knight in one shot. So that's pretty cool. We also have this Chaos Knights list we could take a look at. I just lost it. Come back. Ashton Frizzle with Chaos Knights. He was 8th place, so he lost his first round at post-cut, which is a little bit sad. And he was playing... Oh, how's Herpatrax? I have to grab my Chaos Knights Codex here, chat. Because I don't remember all of the bonuses off the top of my head for this guys. But pretty cool to see. The Bay Area Open was a 170-player tournament, and it was cool to see a relatively diverse top 8. It wasn't, it was still basically 50-50 Azuriani Tyranids. But we still had some good results from not the top 2 factions, which I was pretty heartened by. All right, I can't find my Chaos Knights Codex chat. But we did take 1 Abominant with Blessing of the Dark Master. Seems good. A Knight Desecrator, and then the rest is War Dogs. All right, fair enough. I think that's pretty classic. And it's nice to see the Abominant in play. Aura of Terror on the Abominant, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I don't have the Chaos Knights on Waha chat, unfortunately. There's the first major that ended a mirror match. Yeah, I didn't watch the finals of Rocky Top. Was that a mirror match too? No, that couldn't have been a mirror match, right? Because it was Azuriani versus Tyranids, yeah. Am I crazy about that? Maybe. Who knows? 20 Scarab Terminators plus a Rampager with Battlecore's busting has been fun to experiment with. Yeah, so that's basically what I played in my tournament that I talked about today. Although, I think I like the Rampager better. The awkward part is that Thousand Suns so oftentimes want to... I think my opponent was playing a... Despoiler? Is that gun plus fist? Oh, no. Despoiler is... Oh, yeah. Despoiler is the make your own. Yeah. And Rampager is just like 2+ weapon skill play. Yeah, I think I like the Rampager more than I like the gun version because I don't know. I think people are just hiding. maybe I'm biased because my faction dies if it stands in the open, but it feels to me like relying on direct fire weapons right now is like a big no-no. But the awkward part to me that it felt like to me for Imperial Knight or for Chaos Knights is alongside Thousand Suns is that the Thousand Suns relies so heavily on To the Last that once you put a Knight in there, it ends up sort of it competes with the Scarab Occult units for To the Last, which is a little bit funky to me. And so if you have an aggressive Knight like a Rampager and you want to play it super far forward, it is in like it's probably gonna die, right? Even through Blessing of the Dark Master, which you'll probably trigger, it ends up being the closer you get to your opponent in 40k, the more damage they're able to do to you. So it feels to me like if you're playing aggressively with the Knight, like you're just going to accumulate damage over the course of the game and eventually you're going to go down. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's fine just to protect the other units of Scarab Occults, but I'm not 100% sure. Did I check out the Goonhammer finals? I did not. No. Did I talk about the Hydra list that got secondary area open? I didn't talk about the list that got secondary area open. I wasn't. We did talk about how other sub-factions are getting played in Tyranids now, which is pretty cool. But this is pretty off the wall. It's 15 Hormigons, a Turvagon. It's a Turvagon triple Screamer Killers. That's interesting. I think I get it. The Hormigons are good trade. They trade okay into like into Eldar because they will just kill a thing that they touch if they're playing against an Eldar army, and they have Obsec, so you're not worried about like random like Behareth stealing the objective away from you. So that makes a lot of sense to me. It has a lot of fast Obsec. I believe Hydra has Lurk Biomorphs, right? Oh, no, it doesn't. Just kidding. So the Screamer Killers are just there to hit people. That makes sense. I guess you wouldn't take the Lurk Biomorph. Well, you could pick it anyway, because you want to take the +6 inch move pregame for the little boys. But they do get +1 to hit against smaller units. So that's pretty good. So that you can get around lightning fast reactions. And that's the biggest downside of the Hormigons is the weapon skill 4. I have seen the Turvagon build in the past, though. And they take Maw Closet Thyrax on the Turvagon and then just like sort of sink it into the middle. He does have a 20-man Termagant to sit in front of the Turvagon. And the Turvagon also protects for the Parasite. So I guess as a Wombo combo, you can screen. You can use the body blocking on the Turvagon with the Termagants to protect the Turvagon at least for a couple shots. It's as long as your Termagant unit has 10 models in it, and they're probably going to be in Venom Thrope range and you know, maybe in a Zoanthrope Imperative. So they have a 5+ Invuln, -1 to hit. So they're relatively difficult to kill. But they're making the Turbogon unshootable, and the Turbogon can character protect for the Parasite, which is obsecking the objective. So you have to kill enough Termagants to then fire at the Turbogon if you kill the Turbogon, which in and of itself is already difficult to do. Because he has the adaptive biology, so it's 17 wounds with through T8. No invuln save built in, which sucks, but it is what it is. And then once you do that, you can maybe try to get rid of their obstac, but it's pretty tough. So that's cool. And then Swarmlord. Oh, I guess Swarmlord just... Yeah, we double obsec people with Swarmlord. I do like Swarmlord in the Hormigate list. I think a lot of people are asking me if I would take Swarmlord in the Kraken list. And I would, except that I think I want the Winged Hive Tyrant too much. But if you're playing aggressively with like the Turbogon instead, and the Turbogon's just like running around your big Termagant brick, it makes sense to me that you wouldn't necessarily feel that you need the other Hive Tyrant. And we also don't have Tyrant Guard, right? Because we're not playing aggressively with Swarmlord. He's just supercharging the Hormigate units that go in. So he's like... I mean, he's basically your... You don't need a direct guidance caddy, right? Because you're already theoretically +1 to hit anyway. If you're charging with those guys. So having the full rerolls is way better. And then you can give Obsec to the Gene Stealers, which I really like. Or you could double Obsec the little units, so they're harder to get rid of. I was gonna say I would be worried about this list being kind of easy to peel out. Like once the Hormigants are dead, you're kind of just stuck with characters. But it does have the 3 Screamer Killers that can follow up, basically. So you have to get rid of the infantry, and while you're doing that, the Screamer Killers are following up. So yeah, all right, I'll buy it. So we saw Hydra doing well. We saw Jormungandr doing well. We see Kraken doing well, obviously. Obviously still Leviathan doing well. So we're like almost at half the sub-factions. And I believe that there was a Kronos list in here, actually, too, chat, that I glossed a little bit over. That was 4-1. Yeah, here we go. Oh, no, it's a 5-0. So in the same event that Matt Evans went 5-0, we saw Kronos list go 5-0. With Heavy Venom Cannon Carnifexes. And yeah, here's the Kronos. Here's the Kronos spice is Flamers with +4 inches of range. So 22-inch range acid sprays on Tyrannofexes. Are there Pyrovores in this list? You get 16-inch big flamers off Pyrovores with 2-damage flamers, which means that you can potentially deploy them out of a transport out of range of intercept from Eldar, and you can actually deal sort of massive damage. It depends on what you're shooting at. Obviously, you can't if you want to shoot big flamer, you can't shoot the thing that could intercept you, but you could shoot something else, and you have like 2 inches of play. So it's Neurothrope Hive Tyrant, triple Carnifex with Heavy Venom Cannon, second Hive Tyrant. So it's 2-foot Hive Tyrants? What is this madness? 2-foot Hive Tyrants, triple Tyrannofex with Acid Spray, chat. Hell yeah. Alright, that seems pretty sick. Very cute. I guess you probably don't need the Pyrovores if you have triple acid sprays. I wonder what goes in the Tyrannocyte though. Are you putting a Hive Tyrant in a Tyrannocyte? Probably not, right? Well, I guess, are there Tyrant Guard? No. Maybe you are putting a Hive Tyrant in the Tyrannocyte. You could put a single Carnifex. Let's go. Yeah, I guess there's no obvious picks. It is a lurk biomorph subfaction, so you might just be taking it to, like, sit on an objective. One thing that you can do, and one thing that I mentioned in my my discussion earlier, is that the 5 objective missions with 1 top left can be tough for Tyranids to interact with that top left objective. And having a drop pod basically just to act as a forward deploy has never felt like superfluous to me. I've always kind of liked to have that option. Just be like, I go first, I just put a big OBSEC idiot on the objective. It's mine now. And then you can run dudes to it later if you want to. We can also talk about Steven Box's Blood Angels if we want to as well, chat, before we go ahead and close things out. He's taking Dante. Hell yeah. That's sick. We have Visage of Death, Sanguinary Priest with Rites of War. Okay, so that's the combo, a similar combo to what we saw at MCM. So Visage of Death removes OBSEC from models within 3, and then Rites of War gives OBSEC to friendlies within 6. So you can steal objectives from people with that Sanguinary Priest. I think he's pretty common. Double Incursor, 1 Assault Intercessor. Centurions! Whoa! That's feisty. So Hurricane Bolters and Flamers on a big Centurion squad. Very nice. Death Company in it so we can Forlorn Fury something if we want to, and then triple Sanguinary Guard and an Assault Squad to do actions. Yeah, it's a 6-man Assault Squad, so they're 125 points. They retrieve Knockwind data pretty easy, and we do have a Lightning Claw and a bunch of Chainswords in there, so if we want to be able to fight people with them, we can. We have Wrath of Baal, Sorewarden on the Sanguinary Ancient. Bunch of Thunderhammer boys. And it's all swords, interestingly, on the Sanguinary Guard. Mostly to punch through enemy Armor of Contempt, I guess. It's a really open question whether or not this you take swords or axes on those guys. Because the axes get to strength 6, which is like a really big break point. But the AP's not as good. But I think they're base AP2 and they Assault Doctrine to AP3. So I feel like it's probably fine. I think I'm mostly impressed by Dante. It's been a while since we've seen Dante on the table. And he has Heroic Bearing. Is that the big intervention? Chat? What's Dante's Warlord trait? Oh, it makes his aura bigger. Okay. I guess that's fine. So he can Chapter Master within 9 instead of within 6. Okay. I guess that's pretty cool because he already gives the Sanguinary Guard full rerolls because he's the Warlord. So you can Sanguinary Guard, you can full reroll like multiple Sanguinary Guard units basically just with Dante because he can pass the attack to, or the rerolls to someone else, and then he can stand next to another unit to get the rerolls. So having the extra range to do that makes some sense. Nice. I like it. Strength 5 with +1 wound wins 95% of the games on 95% of the game on 4s at worst. Yeah, I mean it's the same for Strength 6 though. But T5 is like a big breakpoint right now because that's like most Eldar like medium stuff is T5 or T6. And basically the entire Tyranid army is T5, right? So you can wound all that stuff on 2s. So that's a pretty big deal. Which I think is why there's like a contention about it. I think at the end of the day, I don't know. I think generally speaking, the Sanguinary Guard with like 5 attacks and +1 to wounded, +1 AP and all the buffs you can stack on them end up just killing whatever they touch anyway. So unless you're -1 damage, then they're sad. But I guess just in case you do have a unit of Assault Centurions. How's that? Just to make sure. We needed to make sure that somebody gets absolutely murdered. I do like the inclusion of Centurions in the, or at least I'd like the inclusion of a Tactical Doctrine sync in these lists that we're seeing now. And we're saying kind of the same thing. I know I was talking with some Space Wolves players yesterday, and they were talking about taking like aggressors and stuff. And having a weapon that is effective to use Tactical Doctrine on makes a lot of sense, because on turn 2, oftentimes you're just like doing nothing on your Doctrine, because you're like, oh, my Melta Doctrine's gone, so I just have to wait a turn for Assault Doctrine to trigger. Great. But if you can like have a gun that comes out and just vaporizes like an OBSEC unit, so you don't have to do it in melee, it feels pretty okay. And I think once somebody is done with dealing with like 27, how many Sanguinary Guard? Yeah, 21 Sanguinary Guard. They might run out of steam to kill 5 Assault Centurions, which is probably the idea. Because even though they don't get rerolls, the Assault Centurions are still gonna... I mean, they literally win the entire game on 2s, right? Unless you're transhuman. So they will probably just kind of sink the game. And I guess the Centurions not having Core, so not benefiting from Rites of War, doesn't make that much of a difference if you have Visage of Death like embedded in them. Because your opponent not having OBSEC is just as good as you having OBSEC if you kill most of them. So, like, they can't just toe the objective to take it. They have to actually outnumber you, and if you're, like, 6 models and just literally occupying the entire volume of an objective, it's really hard to engage into. Especially since you can't, like, charge them if you can't ignore Overwatch, because they will just murder you in Overwatch. Turn 2 is too important not to capitalize on Tactical Doctrine. Chris Winters, I agree with you. Turn 2 is usually the turn of the game where, like, the most damage ends up. Or, like, either the most damage happens, or it's the setup turn where you set up to deal the most damage. And so either way, it's, like, a positionally important turn. So having a unit that can make the most of that is pretty good. And that's not something that Blood Angels do well. The Sanguinary Guard have the Angelus bolt guns, but they're so short range that they end up just shooting at whatever they're charging anyway, and so it never really makes a difference. But at least the Hurricane Bolters reached 24, which is fine. So yeah. Anyway. So that's, I think, all the interesting lists from this weekend. Some good stuff. Saw some Chaos Knights. Talked about some Blood Angels. Talked about a bunch of different kinds of Tyranids. Eldari Asuryani is like generally... I mean, it's either Ultiway or Hail of Doom right now, which I think is not too surprising. We did see a little bit of Adeptus Custodes popping up in there. Some Adeptus Sororitas. 1 Ultramarines. Ryan Schroeder, the 4-1 with Ultramarines. Oh, no. The list broke, it looks like. That's unfortunate. I don't know what this is. Anyway. That's too bad. But I think it was a kind of classic Ultramarines with forward deploy into redeploy stuff. So, yeah. I'll go ahead and close things out there, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this discussion today. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me. I plan to be live tomorrow on Twitch and on Thursday. And then we have some finals games scheduled on Friday, if you're over on the other streaming platform. So I should be live Wednesday, Friday there, and I will be live all weekend at the Portal GT. So follow me on the Twitch channel where I'll be streaming. And if you're also on the replay channel, those games will be uploaded over there after that. So pretty excited. I'm excited to be commentating more GTs, and I hope to do more of it in the future. So if you enjoy that coverage, any way that you support the channel so I can continue to do coverage of events would be great. But yeah, otherwise just hang out and watch with me. It would be good. You can come hang out and chat. I'll be there on a little microphone talking to people. We'll have player mics too and everything. We did have a player break one of my player mics last week, but I fixed it, so we're all good. And should be pretty good coverage. I even have a backup now, so that's pretty exciting. Yeah, so come hang out with me, everybody. It's been a little bit awkward scheduling games for Thursdays, and so I think we do have one scheduled for this Thursday tentatively, assuming none of the players bail out. If I think that the Thursday games are going to become sort of more of a, I don't know. We're going to do them as we can, I guess. But it's been so awkward to schedule them happening that I don't want to like say that we're going to do them every week, because it's just been tough. We've had a lot of people like bail out day of and stuff, which has been awkward. So we should have one this Thursday. I think it's going to be Sisters of Battle versus no, I think it's going to be Grey Knights and Death Guard potentially, or Death Watch, I think is what I heard down the scuttlebutt, but I'll have to confirm with the players, which should be a fun matchup. So hopefully that works out well. Anyway, I'll go ahead and pop off. Thanks everyone for watching. You should also expect, probably up for patrons tonight and available for everyone tomorrow, another basic tactics video. And I do have an advanced tactics on the roster as well. Like I said at the top of the video, I haven't been feeling too well this week, so I didn't get too many videos done, but I also want to do one on the Space Wolves list that won a GT last week. So if you want me to talk about more Space Wolves, I'll probably do that this week too. So that should be good. Anyway, thanks for chilling with me, everybody.